to find a flag to drape over myself. And again, I just don't necessarily know that that would be appropriate anyway. So, but missed you guys the last couple days. Public Affairs hadn't put out any kind of news articles or anything like that, that daily report that they push out. But instead, since I had a little bit of time this morning, I went in and I deep dove into some of the news, the recent stuff that's come up, and then we'll go from there. But before we do that, given that it is, you know, Independence Day and all that kind of stuff, I just hope the sound works for this. Let's play a little.
We've just arrived in the colonies because there was some bitching over a tiny 3% tax. Not that big a deal, but whatever. This shit will be easy. What the actual fuck? Where the hell are they? Unless they're lined up 10 feet in front of me wearing bright blue uniforms, I can't see them. These guys are such assholes. What kind of a dickhead doesn't line up in a straight line and patiently take turns shooting one another? Sir, these colonials are worse than gonorrhea. They hide behind trees and pick us off while we pass through single file wearing bright red.
I sure hope this is coming up. You guys can hear the sound.
We still don't know how to handle this ingenious tactic of hiding behind trees. God damn, we've been here 8 years and we're just getting our shit pushed in. These boys weren't kidding. They really do hate taxes. Okay, this is our last stand. We may have a chance if we just... Nope. Shit. Never mind, those ass-smelling French are here. I'm here in place of Cornwallis because apparently he's really sick today to deliver terms of surrender to that giant stud right there.
Oh, that's awesome. Then, you know, it smells like bitch in here because we don't want no baby back bitches. And then I thought about that. So yeah, there you go. There's a couple of memes for you. And then let's get off of the sharing. Let's stop that. There we go. All right. So if you guys are new here or you haven't seen us do a live like this, I try every day, at least Monday through Friday, to do some kind of daily drop, which is the news that Public Affairs curates and sends out to the commanders and chiefs and anybody who kind of subscribes to that RSS feed and that kind of stuff. So like I said, they haven't posted it in a couple of days. So I went in and I did my own and we're going to go from there. All right. First up, part of the joint news, counter-UAS or unmanned aerial system task force gains attention. The DoD's new Joint Interagency Task Force for Counter Unmanned Aerial Systems, UASs, led by the Army, was highlighted in posts on X. General James Mingus stated it builds on the Counter Small UAS Office. Integration remains unclear, signaling ongoing efforts to address drone threats to United States assets. I can tell you right now that we are, sorry, just getting some hoist, that we are pretty, I want to say far behind, but the whole drone thing is a problem for us. And not the, when we talk about drone things, I'm not talking about the massive drones, you know, the ones that have to take off out of airfields and stuff like that. I'm kind of talking about the smaller commercial off the shelf drones, you know, quadcopters and that kind of stuff that are becoming an issue. One, because, you know, they can surveil aircraft, personal vehicles, people. They can get a lay of the land. Also, they create airspace issues. You know, if they're flying around an airfield that has a lot of traffic, you know, an F-15 or a C-130 or something like that could hit it, causing obviously catastrophic problems, more than likely. You know, so it is a tough problem to solve. However, there is technology out there for it that is being researched and developed, and we'll get to the point where we are able to counter it pretty well. Guam Command Center contract awarded. A $295 million contract was awarded for a hardened Joint Command and Control Operations Center in Guam, integrating Aegis Ashore and Space Development Agency missile warning links. An additional $93 million supports follow-on payloads for protected tactical SATCOM or satellite system programs. Let's see. Oh, Nighthawk Viper, Nighthawk Viper. Sorry about that. Palantir's Titan already solved that. Maybe not to 100%, right? And it hasn't been fielded as much as you would think. So I don't know. I have seen a little bit of that literature on it, but I don't think it is widely proliferated yet. 2.8 billion funded. Whew. Okay, going on, and then I'll read the chat here a little bit. Raising Cane visits Navy destroyer in Greece. Joint Chiefs Chairman General Dan Raising Cane visited the USS Thomas Hudner in Greece, praising its crew. The destroyer is one of the 5 deployed to the Eastern Mediterranean in support of Israel and regional defense. Man, if you guys don't know, obviously Raising Cane is a big deal, right? Like it's the Joint Chiefs coming out. The amount of logistics and dog and pony that those guys must have had to go through just to get him out there to the Hudner. I mean, that's, dude. I'm glad that he went out there and visited. And you always want, like, you always kind of welcome the visits, but at the same time, when you think about all the work and all the hoopla that goes into it, you're like, dude, I just can't wait for this person to come and go, and then we can get back to normal operations. All right, next, U.S. soldiers defend IUD from Iranian missile attack. Air defenses at Ayudid Air Base had 2 minutes to intercept a missile barrage from Iran. Only 40 soldiers remained after evacuation. General Raising Cane detailed the successful defense as part of a 15-year monitoring effort on Iran's Fordo nuclear site. There was a video that was going around of this, and you could see the systems engaging the missiles, and then you could hear everybody in the background cheering and that kind of stuff. And that right there was an awesome video because it shows, and on an Independence Day, it shows the American spirit that you can be shooting at us and we will happily return fire and happily give you the middle finger while we're doing it. So glad that those 40 soldiers were out there and defended Ayudid and absolutely crushed it. Next, Trump's claim on Iranian attack at Ayudid. President Trump stated he allowed Iran to retaliate against Ayudid after U.S. strikes. General Raising Cane confirmed the Patriot defense was effective, though the Pentagon clarified Trump did not authorize or provoke attack. I mean, obviously, that's kind of I see where he's going from. When President Trump says, yeah, I allowed them to attack, it means that he fully expected it post Operation Midnight Hammer. Like, you've got to expect some kind of response. It's just like after we took out Soleimani in, was it 18 or 19, I think is when it happened. And then that's when Iran again sent, man, my math today, or my memory today, it was like 63 empty mid-range missiles from Iran into sporadic places where U.S. service members were. But they also called ahead of time to let us know, and they didn't put full high explosive yields in those missiles. So, he did kind of allow it if you look at it like that. But it's also something that we completely expect. I mean, how weak of a country Iran's weak anyway, but you've got to understand that even they are a machismo culture. So if they get attacked, you better believe they're going to send something, at least to give that perception that they're not just taking it on the chin. Next, Pentagon tests secure cloud-based network. A new secure cloud-based comms network is being tested aboard a British carrier to streamline classified coalition communication. It aims to reduce compartmentalized systems using data tagging and may inform future NATO communication integration. I think I actually talked about this the other week, or maybe earlier in this week. That is one of the things that we struggle with in terms of compartmentalization and sharing of information, especially classified information. And I don't necessarily mean, yeah, it's bad or we're not great at it when it comes to our foreign partners, right? Whether it's the UK, the French, the Aussies, and so on and so on. But you'd be amazed at how much just between the services we don't talk. We have our own kind of classification systems when we start talking about yeah, okay, everybody uses SIPR. If you're in, what SIPR is, right? And there's some joint networks that are at the top secret level and all that kind of stuff. But people don't know how to classify things because they don't remember what, because there's so many different programs that are out there and so many different things are classified at certain levels. Sometimes they're no foreign, so they're no foreign eyes. Sometimes they're Five Eyes, so they're open to the five allied nations. Sometimes they're open to even more, and then sometimes they're behind behind another kind of program wall, right? So you can get in a lot of trouble if you have a security violation or a security incident, right? There's an investigation, you could lose your clearance, or your clearance could be suspended or put on pause for a little bit. So people overly classify things. Like, I can't tell you how many times where not a single thing in the email is classified, not even secret, but somebody will put secret no foreign and classify the entire email chain as that, to which that means that I can no longer forward it on to people or anything like that. And nobody on that email chain can do the same thing, right? So it creates problems. So we don't even know how to classify and share information within the DoD. And the same goes for between Air Force Special Operations Command, Air Combat Command, Mobility Command. I mean, it's Global Strike Command. It's really, really bad. We're really, really terrible at it. So this is good that we're actually trying to get after something like that, because if we think, if things in the Pacific happen to kick off, or another contingency operation or military operation or war kicks off, we are going to need to share information, more information and better information than we did during like OEF, OIF, that kind of stuff. Military spouses face high rates of depression and anxiety. A survey found military veteran spouses suffer from depression and anxiety at 2 to 3 times the national average. Over half reported mental health issues. 2/3 reported poor sleep, and 1/3 were dissatisfied with life quality. Now, I wonder. I got to be careful. I'm trying not to get myself in trouble here. How much of that, and I know it says military spouses, so it's, it could be husbands, could be wives, right? But I'm just going to go with wives right now, military spouses that are wives. When you get Joseph, especially Army Joseph, right? And if you are in the Army, you're familiar with the Army, you know exactly who I'm talking about when I say Joseph or Joe. They have a tendency, just like airmen do, right, to go to strip clubs. Then they dump a lot of money into strippers. Then, of course, in return for all that money that they're dropping into strippers, they're getting an attractive, more, hopefully, maybe not attractive, but a somewhat attractive woman showing them attention, being super nice to them. And then they forget about all the money that they threw at this woman and go, no, she really likes me. Even when all of his friends and all of his boys are going like, dude, she's a stripper. You forked over $3,000 to her. Of course she's being nice to you. No, man, no, she's different. She's different. She really likes me. That is a lot of times what some of these young soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines do and fall for, right? Like, it's kind of like the 34% APR rate for a V6 Mustang coming out the gate of one of the bases. It's the same kind of thing. And so a lot of times these folks, they marry people that they should have never been involved with, or there were red flags that they just didn't see because they were blind to it. And that goes for the military spouses, women or men that, because there are some active duty members that for sure have some red flags, and then that military spouse should have gone running the absolute opposite direction. But I do wonder, like, what this is about. Like, so one of them is 1/3 dissatisfied with life quality or quality of life. Yes, there are some places that you could be stationed that are not the best places. Historically, or Air Force Special Operations Command historically struggles with Cannon Air Force Base out in Clovis, New Mexico. There's a Special Tactics unit out there. There's a CV-22 unit out there. There's MC-130s. There's AC-130s. There's the remotely piloted aircraft units out there. Like, it is an Air Force Special Operations base. It has also been, the facilities are nice. Everybody raves about the gym, especially from the STS side of the house. Everybody's like, oh, it's amazing. It's close-knit family out here. At the same time, retention out there is in a flat spin heading out to sea. It's out of control. There are people that will be, say, at Hurlburt Field or Fort Bragg in North Carolina and get orders to Cannon, and they've been in for 10 or 12 years. And to avoid those orders, they'll just go, dude, I'm not taking my family to Cannon. The schools are terrible. The location is terrible. They don't have the medical care that I need. And then they 7-day option in terms of, hey, I'm out. I'm just going to get out of the Air Force. Like, it, or that's if they're allowed to, right? Sometimes they're stuck because they have the retainability and the active duty service commitment, and they're stuck and they have to go. But that plays right into that depression of quality of life when you know that you're out in some farmland that reeks of cow poop, and there's gangs, really bad gangs. All the schools are terrible, and you're going to be there for at least 4 years. And allergies are really bad out there. And a lot of the medical care out there is not great, So that plays right into the quality of life. Same with, if you start talking about, like, I'd be willing to bet if my wife knew that she would be alone as much as she did. I mean, she knew it. She knew it because when we were dating and even engaged, I was gone all the time. So she did know it going in. I know that was not her preference, though, for me to be gone 280 days out of the year, multiple years in a row. But she stuck with it and she crushed it, and if anything, it made her stronger for it. Definitely made the kids stronger for it. So I don't know. Poor sleep. I bet everybody's got poor sleep now because everybody's got shitty ass sleep hygiene. We just had a couple months ago, we had Dr. Lee Kaler on. She's a sleep expert for the FBI. And we talked about sleep hygiene, and it's so important, but now everybody's on their phones, doom scrolling or staying on devices until, the wee hours. And yeah, so I'm not surprised by that one bit. All right. Next. Okay. Here's what I wanted to get into. Just for data purposes anyway, and for argument's sake. The F-47 fighter investment highlighted. $3.5 billion investment in the F-47 next generation air dominance fighter to counter China. While the F-47 is a budget priority, the $3.5 billion claim lacks official confirmation and remains speculative. 185 to 200 birds plan to be purchased. Now, to me, that doesn't seem like very many, right? And I want to give you an example of it, right? So the greatest air dominance platform or air-to-air fighter that has ever been created is the F-22 Raptor. It is superior to everything that exists when it comes to air-to-air, right? We were supposed to buy 750 of them, but we adjusted it to 339, then down to 277, and then finally we settled at 195. Mostly that was due to the cost because it was incredibly expensive. So just for the bird itself, like out the door, the bird was $150 million. But once they calculated all the research and development, all the infrastructure and everything like that, each plane ended up costing around $330 million per plane. That's crazy. We can't, and again, we canceled the remaining purchases because of cost, because of kind of the Cold War ending and all that kind of stuff. Now, you got to think like these things were researched and developed back in the 90s. Okay. And we just saw them come online. I don't know when the first one popped up. It must have been like 2000, 2001. But so, post Cold War, we didn't have any kind of near peer adversary at that time. We weren't worried about China. We weren't worried about Russia when it came to air dominance. Right. So they were like, hey, we don't really need these things that much. They're super expensive. So let's just cut our costs and then shift the money elsewhere. And then plus during that time, we were knee deep in Afghanistan and Iraq, and it was all counterinsurgency stuff. So most people wanted A-10s, AC-130s, F-16s, F-18s, Strike Eagles, that kind of stuff to do air to ground stuff. So it's pretty wild. Now, let me bring up something real quick. Let's see. Okay, here's what I want to talk about because actually, no, you know what? I'm gonna save that for later. Save that. All right, next. Air Force leaders warn of China's growing threat. The U.S. Air Force officials told Congress that China's expanding military poses a critical threat. The service struggles to balance modernization with current ops. That plays directly into what I just talked about, and then what I'm going to hit at the very end when it comes to modernization and current ops. Like we are, and this is every year. Like, so anybody that's in the military that deals with finances exactly knows that they're like, when I say we are in a fiscally constrained environment, everybody's gonna be like, yeah, no shit, dude. We're in that every single year, which is true, right? And I know that the big beautiful bill, whatever, was just signed, and then we got the budget, which is an increase from what I understand. I don't remember off the top of my head what the no kidding final table slap of the amount is, but we've had retired General Deptula on. He talked about how underfunded the Space Force is, 3% of the DoD budget, which is insane. Now I know that they did get an increase in this last budget pass, but which is awesome because when you start thinking about things that they need to do in space, and then we're giving them 3% of the budget, like that's just wild to think about. But yeah, we struggle. So we're still conducting operations. You guys know it. We just did Operation Midnight Hammer. That was one, right? But there's operations that go on every single day that don't make the news. And so we still have to pay for all that while trying to modernize current aircraft. Our tankers need upgrades. Our fighters need upgrades to the existing systems that they have. Some of them need new engines. Then we're also trying to build B-21, F-47, the collaborative combat aircraft, the Sentinel intercontinental ballistic missile system. Like we're trying to do all that, all three of these things, and pay for pay our military members and pay for retirements, and like it's crazy, right? So it is very difficult to do. Also, with all the budget cuts and everything like that on the left hand side of it from FY25 or fiscal year 25, like all these things go, and then that doesn't include infrastructure issues that we have on so many of the bases. I'm sure you guys have seen, the black molds and some of the base housings. Also, like actual operational facilities are having problems and getting any kind of construction because now it's super expensive due to inflation, due to cost of things. Like it is difficult to do. And China doesn't worry about that, but the US has to worry about that. So it's a difficult situation to solve. All right. Next, Air Force budget concerns. FY26 budget reflects a net loss of 264 aircraft, 340 retired, 76 gained, raising concern over readiness. The Senate's July 1 reconciliation bill, which includes 150 billion for defense, is pivotal but still uncertain. Yeah, if you guys aren't tracking, we are retiring the A10. I'm not happy about it. You know, obviously I have some very close ties to the A10s, but they've been trying to kill that thing for a very long time now. And then every time the Air Force is like this close to killing it, something happens, some kind of operation happens or contingency operation happens, and the A10 gets rejuvenated and more life added to it. Now, I would say that this is as close as we have ever gotten to the A10, no kidding, retiring. You know, I mean, they've already shut down units. Things are going to the boneyard, you know, and at some point, sure, it does have to happen. I just wish, like when we start talking about money, and I know that we already have talked about money, but it would not cost that much money to keep the A10 around, upgrade its engines, upgrade its avionics systems, and then that thing would be flying for another 30 years, demolishing the enemy. But I don't make those decisions, so yeah. Next, oh, speaking of the A10, Air Force to retire A10s and cancel the E7 program. If you guys aren't tracking what the E7 is, it is a airborne command and control system loaded with air battle managers and those kind of command and control folks on that plane. The Australians already have them up and running. The Air Force has struggled to get any, and so now it looks like we're going to cancel it. So the FY26 proposal retires the A10 fleet and cancels the E7 Wedgetail, creating a targeting gap because the E7 and the folks on there would help with targeting in command and control. F-35A buys are halved, and B-21 and F-47 programs received boosted numbers. All right, so let's check out those numbers. This is, I know I said it was at the end, but it's not at the end. It's here. Oh man, of course I'm gonna struggle to find it while you guys are actually on here live. And I don't have the page up, so I'm not seeing you guys laughing at me or anything. Okay. You remember when I talked about the F-22? So why is that not? Sorry, I'm trying to find, I took notes, but now I can't find them. Well, poopy. I can't find my notes. Anyway, all right, next. Air Force budget boost munitions funding. The FY26 budget includes $4.8 billion for munitions, with $1.9 billion from reconciliation. Funding supports the AIM 260 and the AIM 260, the AIM 120, the GBU 57, which I'm sure everybody's familiar with the GBU 57 now, bunker buster, the massive ordnance penetrator, and the family of affordable mass missiles. Those AIM 260s and AIM 120s are not cheap. They're not cheap at all. Of course, the GBU 57 isn't either, but we have to do a better job of thinking long-term when it comes to our munitions, because these things are not like a video game and they're endless. And these, although the company, I think it's Raytheon that builds the AGM 114, the Hellfire, like they can pump them out relatively quickly, but it still takes time. It is still a complex missile or a complex bomb, and it takes time, and they're super expensive, and you can't just mass produce those things. So that's why other munitions that can be mass produced, like harpoons and that kind of stuff, should be looked at and considered, because they're viable weapons, viable options for engagements. All right, next. The Air Force retrofits Qatari jet for Air Force One. Funds from the Senate. Here we go. This is what I was talking about in terms of modernization and current operations and all that kind of stuff. So funds from the Sentinel ICBM, Intercontinental Ballistic Missile program, are being used to retrofit the Qatari 747 into the new Air Force One. However, this is what they caveated with. The move of the funds will not delay Sentinel development. I'm calling bullshit. There's no way that you move those millions upon millions of dollars over to another program and it's not going to delay the program, the Sentinel program that it's trying to develop. That's just, that math doesn't math. And having seen things get, funds and resources be moved to other places, it absolutely delays things. So, I mean, the folks that are saying this are just, not to call them liars, but they're just straight up lying. That is not a true statement. Next, Air Force removes alternate fitness test options. Sit-ups, push-ups, and the 1 mile run are now mandatory for trainees. Reverse crunches and shuttle runs are out. Proposed changes may extend the run to 2 miles with testing twice a year. So the current system right now, or the current program, is, you do your push-ups, sit-ups, and 1.5 mile run. If you score over a 90, you only have to take the test once a year. If you score below a 90, you have to take the test twice a year, every 6 months, until you score over a 90. Now, the proposal is to keep the push-ups and the sit-ups, add the waist measurement back into it. So the BMI, which, if you look at the Air Force's chart for your height to the weight range that you should be in, I am 100% in the morbidly obese area. Like those charts want you to be as big as this Hydro Flask. Like, I'm not even kidding. Everybody that I know that jacks a little bit of steel is considered overweight or morbidly obese on that scale. I don't know how I'm supposed to live with those kind of measurements, even though I will dominate the test. Like, every single test I was getting was like 98s, 97s, 98s on, but yeah, anyway, but I personally, I don't mind the 2 mile extension or the 1/2 mile extension, taking it up to 2 miles. And I also don't mind the twice a year. Now, hey, you could say, hey, well, that's easy to say because you're out now. Well, I'm also a guy that had to do the AFSOC test and the operator fitness test and all that kind of stuff too, while also having to do the Air Force PT test. So cry me a river. But I am empathetic to folks that, like, for example, say you attend the weapons school, right? The weapons school is 5.5 months. You take your test right before you leave. There's 2 types of students that come to the weapons school. Ones that either lose a whole bunch of weight because they're not eating and not sleeping well, not because they're working out, just because they're losing so much sleep and not eating. And then the others that overeat, still not getting sleep, but they're overeat and not working out or anything like that. So they gain a whole bunch of weight. Then after 5.5 months are required to take an additional 2 mile test or Air Force PT test upon returning after that. Is that fair? Well, shit, life's not fair, right? But I am empathetic to that. And yes, those students will get a certain amount of, I can't remember what it is, like 30 days or 45 days post at after you finish up an official course, you get to redo your test, or not redo your test, but you get the chance to do your Air Force PT test. but I don't remember what that is. So moral of the story is stay on top of your PT. Don't let yourself get too relaxed and too comfortable and gaining a whole bunch of weight. All right, Space Force news. SpaceX awarded an $81 million task order for Space Force or USSF 178. The Space Force announced an $81 million task order to SpaceX for the classified USSF 178 launch. This follows their earlier $8.6 million weather satellite contract. Man, I know nothing about that, so I can't really talk about it. 81 million seems about the right number. I no clue. So far out of my element, Donnie. All right. Golden Dome missile defense criticism. China criticized. Why the fuck do we give a shit about what China had to say? China criticized President Trump's January 2025 Golden Dome space missile defense shield, calling it space weaponization. General Whiting supports counter space growth. Air Force Research Laboratory continues cislunar tracking development. I have no idea what cislunar is, but think about that though. China criticized President Trump's Golden Dome because they say it's weaponizing space. Obviously, this is not a classified network. Obviously, we can't talk about all the details of this shit that China's actually doing. However, I'll say that you weaponized it first, if that is what we're going to do. You know, you guys have thrown some shady things up in space, and we know about it. So you did it first. If you would even like the whole Golden Dome thing is a defense system anyway. It's not an offensive type system. We have those already. Okay. We don't need another one. This is for protection. But all right, next, loss of satellite data impacts hurricane forecasting. The DMSP, I'm not sure what that stands for, microwave imager, will soon go offline, reducing access to storm data. The system will still serve DoD missions, but public forecasting will be impacted. Yeah, I don't know how I feel about that. Who watches the news these days? All right, it's like going over to chat. Do you guys actually watch the Weather Channel these days, or do you do what I do and you find some of these streamers that are on YouTube that are doing active weather forecasting and storm chasing and stuff like that? Like those channels have millions of followers and they get millions of views, and they're showing some wild ass weather that are happening in America. That's where I get my weather forecasts and my weather data from. Now, those guys, without this system, I got to imagine, because it's for public forecasting, I got to imagine those folks are going to get impacted by this as well. So I'm sure that we're going to put something else back up in space to help with this, but it'll be interesting to see. All right. Of interest, Arizona man sentenced for lazing Air Force jets. Don't do this. A man received a 9-day prison sentence for lazing 2 F-16s during training. Such incidents have been rising, posing flight safety risks. Like, this is a massive, like, it absolutely is the safety of flight. Not only are we talking about F-16s that don't have NVGs on, right? Like, we'll just use the F-16s. So if they happen to not be wearing NVGs, night vision goggles, and they get hit with a laser, that's one thing, right? And it hurts, right? And it blinds them. They're flying an aircraft at 500 miles an hour, probably relatively close to the ground. How do you think that's going to work out? Then you start talking about wearing NVGs. Now, the whole wearing NVGs, if I remember right, is supposed to protect you from the laser energy, but it's still extremely bright and will blind you, temporarily blind you. And nobody's wearing laser goggle or laser glasses or goggles underneath their NVGs, especially not aviators, right? So if you want to do some serious time, Actually, I don't think I can legally say that, but don't go lazing aircraft, whether it's military aircraft or police helicopters or coasties or the fire department helicopters that are dumping fuel. Like, just don't laze aircraft. All right. Opinion. U.S. Air Force faces strategic challenges. Operation Midnight Hammer showed off U.S. power projection, but exposed weaknesses in the U.S. Air Force capability. Analysts urge rapid B-21 expansion, F-35 purchases, and reinstating the E7. And one thing I didn't talk about in here is, with the cancellation of the E7, what they want to do is just bolster the space capability so that we can just do more command and control from space for a couple of reasons. One, because we can have persistent eyes on whatever we're doing, persistent communications. We've got farther reach that way. We don't have to put people on aircraft. We don't have to put people on aircraft, put people in harm's way or anything like that. So, are there limitations to it? Of course there are. Is it going to be expensive? Yeah, of course it is. But maybe canceling the E7, which I'm sure some of my ABM and command and control folks will be irate with me for saying that, but maybe objectively, maybe it is better that we do cancel the E7, but I don't know. I'm more looking at when it says Operation Midnight Hammer expose weaknesses in Air Force capability. So I wanted to deep dive into that a little bit. So what vulnerabilities did Operation Midnight Hammer, which again is an amazing name, what did it highlight? So it highlighted that we have an aging fleet, right? Our B1s are old. Our B-52s are even older. Our tankers are old. KC-135, I think, was 1960s, right? And it's still an incredibly capable aircraft, right? So I'm not downplaying the fact that it's old. It's one of the fastest ones we have. And I got in a pissing match with Air Force Public Affairs about which one's faster, the KC-46 or the KC-135. And it depends on how you want to shape the data. Will tell you who's right. But so we required tankers, we required a lot of them. They're aging, right? More aircraft retired or will retire in FY26 than previous years. Like I said, we're extremely dependent on tankers. Our KC-135s and KC-46s, although very capable, are very susceptible to, air defense systems and air-to-air attack. And if you don't think that if we're going against a near peer, that they're not going to take out logistics, because if you can take out logistics, you can win the war. They are absolutely going to go after our tankers because we rely on them so much. They are definitely, high value targets for people. Other things were our E3 Sentry and our J-Stars were outdated. We talked about the cancellation of the E7. We don't have enough B2s. We don't, or F-22s for that matter. We talked about how many we bought there. So that limits our strike capability when we start talking about penetrating integrated air defense systems and going all the way into countries that, like Iran. I lightly touched on it, but our stockpile of munitions. Okay. So we've got a lot of artillery shell. Actually, we don't have a lot of artillery shells because we gave so much of it to Ukraine. So we're trying to restock all that. We've got plenty of Hellfires, right? But some of these other munitions that we're talking about that are going to be critical to making sure that we are successful in future operations, we don't have a massive amount of them. So when we, blow our wad on freaking drones and stuff like that, instead of shooting them down with bullets, like it creates an issue. We've got a pilot and maintainer shortage. It's not for lack of recruitment either. Like, we're getting plenty in. It's the retention that we're failing at. And I know the Air Force just celebrated, reaching 100% of its recruitment. But I can't confirm this, but I'm pretty sure they moved the goalpost to the left, which if you have to move the goalpost, you didn't really hit your numbers. Now, if that's not true, then I recant my statement, but I'm pretty sure they moved the goalpost from what I understand. But hey, that's great. We get enough people in, but if we can't keep people, then what are we doing? So let's see. So some of the recommended fixes obviously would be, upgrade of the systems that we currently have of aircraft that we have that are outdated, KC-135, even the KC-46, our current command and control aircraft, increased purchase of B-21 Raiders, more F-35s. I said, I'm two minds about the E7 wedge tail getting canceled. I'm not too worried about it, but we definitely need to increase our precision guided munition stockpile because that we are going to rely on that so heavily in the future. So, yeah. Okay. Well, that has been the news. Let me hop into the chat real quick, see what I've missed. I do appreciate you guys being here, especially on the 4th of July. All right. Let's see. Whiskey Mo, thanks for being in here, man. Joseph. So Whiskey Mode absolutely knows who Joseph is. Me after 3,000. Bishop X, that's you. $3,000 table lap dance. Oh boy. Yeah, Whiskey Mo. Cannon Air Force Base definitely leaves stuff to be desired. Some of the folks that have been out there, though, they rave about it. They really do, and they mean it genuinely. It's kind of like when you're in that kind of deployed situation or deployed scenario, you become really close with the people that you're around and work with, and that 100% happens out there because each other is all they have. All right. What else have we got here? And pay for SEER guys to go to CDQC. Jeez. All right. I don't see any questions in here. Not that I asked for questions. Hey, good seeing you, Jasmine. All right. Out here. Hey, listen, it's 4th of July. Go out there, have fun, celebrate the freedoms that you have. It's a great day. Cook out, watch some fireworks. Make sure tomorrow you have all 10 digits. Some of you guys may have 11, but whatever. Take care, enjoy yourself, and we're out here. See you.